This episode of Housing for Good is brought to you by listeners and supporters just like you. If you believe in creating safe, stable, and affordable housing for everyone, consider supporting the McPherson Housing Coalition. Your donation helps us provide housing solutions, support services, and hope to those who need it the most. To donate, visit our website, McPhersonHousingCoalition.org. All donations are tax deductible. Thank you.
Welcome to Housing for Good, a podcast dedicated to housing topics and issues affecting our communities in McPherson County and beyond. With years of experience and expertise, hosts Chris Goodson and Karolyn Moore discuss housing challenges and opportunities with other experts from a variety of housing fields.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Housing for Good. I'm Karolyn.
And I'm Chris.
And today we are just going to continue our conversation with Donna Schenck-Hamlin regarding community land trusts and what do we do next steps if we want to move forward. So, Chris, ask the first question.
So the next question, and a very important question, and I think something everybody's going to want to know is, how are land trusts funded? Where do we come up with the money to make this happen in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's get back to the definition of a community land trust.
Okay.
A nonprofit entity dedicated to long-term stewardship of affordable land. We were in Manhattan looking around for somebody who'd take that first step. Do we have existing nonprofits that would be willing to run a pilot test? The reason I say pilot test, it's a magical word. It takes away the scary aspect of a 99-year-old ground lease and a commitment by one group to develop, rehab, build, and then the important part, the consumer, the preparation of income-qualified households for getting mortgages and paying them off. Mm-hmm. There is that human social services side to this as well. CLTs are dedicated to affordable housing targeted towards particular income brackets. They typically are looking at households, as we said earlier, struggling to participate in the open market. Mm-hmm. So if you say, where do we start? Who is the we? The we is community participants from the public sector, nonprofit sector, and private sector, even the educational sector, who say, let's come together and start with a project. That's really how Manhattan started. And they found that in our particular case, there was a willing affiliate of Habitat for Humanity International here that said, like other habitats in other states, we're willing to set it up as a program. We're not yet conflating our Habitat affiliate with the CLT, mm-hmm. but we'll start a program, meaning our next build will be the pilot test, the proof of concept, that we understand all of the legal implications, and at the same time, they wanted to do innovative housing. So find in your community many groups that want to learn about the CLT, the Community Land Trust. Try to identify the contributors of land. Try to find those people who are either in the rehab or in the new construction business that are willing to give it a try. And in some communities, for example, Ithaca, New York, that we visited, they said, we're first and foremost concerned about deterioration of traditional housing downtown. So they did not start with land acquisition for new construction at all. A consensus process has to develop to identify the sites as well as the people.
So you can basically do this any way you want, it almost sounds like. As long as you follow specific rules, it can be anything. I mean, I have in my mind all kinds of things that could be a possibility here. I mean, you could have a nonprofit willing to do it. If you had a high school program building homes, they could do that part of it. I mean, you could really connect this thing and make it grow in any way you wanted to. You can do scattered sites. You can do a whole new subdivision. You could do downtown businesses.
You're right. And if you look at other existing CLTs across the country, you'll find that some of them began with an inspired donation. For example, in Kansas City area, their Habitat is working with Habitat CLT on a whole new development that a church that had land and was inspired to dedicate that land to affordable housing made available to them. Their next challenge was, okay, now we have to build on it, and we have to build affordably. As long as the various partners coming together, recognizing the essential structure of shared equity, the division between nonprofit-owned land and income-qualified tenants, you might call it, they're only leasing the land, but the house is owned by them and the bankers. You get all of those people to agree on the model, then proof of concept, one house at a time is the best way, and probably the most safe way gradually than saying, oh, okay, now we have 10 acres and we're going to do this big development, learn it all at once.
Yeah. Well, that's a great, I love the model. I'm in my mind, I can really see how this could work in any place, especially in McPherson County.
Yeah.
Where we can make something like this work in all of the communities, do scattered sites. Doing subdivision development is extremely expensive and very difficult. There's so many pieces to that. I mean, we've done some minor development, but nothing of this scope.
Well, and the infrastructure required for brand new development is a monster in and of itself.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of the
Test
homes.
case or a pilot project.
Yes, and the individual homes that rather than building new, you're already taking what's there and you're rehabbing it, and
Now, there will be one center part of the wheel. There will be dedicated staff to the administration of this, and that includes the social service side. Habitat affiliates are accustomed to the dedication of staff to what they sometimes call the pipeline. How do we prepare those families that could be homeowners for that stage? And again, if you have too big a development, then the challenge is how do you synchronize the construction of these new homes with the preparation through credit counseling and through the acquisition of loans of the buyers?
Yeah.
So that said, there are existing federal programs, and there are groups like the FHLB, which stands for the Federal Home Loan Bank, an association of bankers that have an affordable housing grant to help such things as down payment assistance. There are aspects of this that are the physical development, and they're also the consumer development that have to be paid attention to.
Yeah.
And for that, having a partnership with a nonprofit already experienced in affordable housing projects is a good place to start. Again, maybe as a project, developing into a program, and then ultimately achieving that 501c3 independent status. But we learned from other Habitat affiliates that not all of them jump in and say, we are CLT. They might have another affiliate
That is doing
sub-affiliate
that's doing that work.
does that work.
So I was interested, I mean, I'm going to diverse a little bit, but as far as the social side of it, because that's always a big deal for us, is making sure that our families have what they need to stay housed, to make sure that they're stable. Is that ever a part of this? Or is that just something the nonprofit themselves would develop?
You want successful home ownership.
Yeah.
That's the model.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's preparation for that. Most of us didn't start with any kind of literacy on housing. We certainly didn't get it in high school. And the education of the consumer is an essential part of that. There's also stages of life that people go through where they have to basically be renting until they're prepared. But we're finding that through the veterans programs and through HUD, I only found about this last year, and I hope it continues. There's a program to take housing choice vouchers and apply them to a down payment. Who knew?
That's an interesting. I wonder how that would work. That's a very interesting idea.
Well, and the whole idea of home ownership and your credit score we've had conversations with that. People don't even think about what it's going to take for them to qualify to buy a home until they get to that point.
Yeah.
And then it's like, you're ready to go. I'm all energetic. I'm all in. And then you go talk to the bank or the lender and they're going, okay, wait a minute. There's a lot of work here that we need to do on your credit history and getting you ready to buy that first home. So, yeah, I love the whole idea of setting people up to succeed and not to get in something that they're going to lose, and they're going to lose everything that they've just tried to put into it. So we're talking about the funding. We've talked a little bit about the partnerships and getting the community buy-in. What would be the next step?
The next step, you've identified one group, well-established, that understands the spectrum from the development to the consumer side to act, is to start that project. And for that, I'm glad you mentioned bankers and credit unions. These groups already have a relationship to a group like Habitat for Humanity. They have already been working on title. They've already been working on loan business. And so the beauty of CLTs is that every community has its own history, its own partnerships, and its way of going about the business. My guess is that the partnership developing has been happening, so has been the search for land or housing that needs to be addressed. Let's say you had a rehab project. Then the acquisition of that home for rehabilitation might be aided by a land bank, if you have one.
Okay.
Cities and counties that are concerned about neglected property often have tax sales, or they have agreements to dedicate certain properties to this nonprofit goal. Now you have land, you have a group that is willing to take those first steps to rehabilitate it, and probably those social services that have already identified people closest to readiness for the down payment. They've gone through a lot of training, through credit counseling, and they're ready. Then you put it together as a project.
So I'm curious about challenges. Are there challenges to this? What do you think the biggest hurdles are going to be? Getting people to buy into what we're trying to do, or whoever the nonprofit would be? Is that the hardest part?
You're addressing the challenge right now, which is public education. And that means not only of your community, but our state legislators. One of the things that we learned is that county tax appraisers have to consider every year as they come up with the appraisal formula that if it's based upon fair market value, what about people who are not going to be permitted to sell it on the fair market, but on a restricted resale formula that guarantees its affordability to the next owner? So that's a problem.
And is that being addressed at all?
That problem was raised to us by our own county, and we went to the state legislature. So we're now educating our state representatives and senators in what a CLT is. That's state-level legislative education, and we hope we're now working in a network of CLTs in Kansas to introduce, first of all, legislation that adjusts the tax appraiser's formula, acknowledging this reality that to appraise totally on fair market value when, in fact, it can't get sold without corrections to. That's what we're working on right now.
I can tell you that each county appraiser, I was in that office for 12 years during reappraisal, so I have a little bit of knowledge about what can and can't happen. And I know for rental properties, McPherson County puts a little thing on there that make little like a percentage, so it lowers that value so that because those are not going to sell at the same rate if they put it out there, because more than likely if someone comes in, they're going to buy a package of rentals and not just one rental. But that is marked on that to lower that value. So that's so simple. All they have to do is put a little thing on there, each county, and they have the right to do that. So if they're saying that they can't do that, that is not true. They can go on there, put a percentage on that particular piece of property, which then lowers that. It is a possibility. So some of them, maybe they just don't even understand their own programming or how they're supposed to do that. But that is something that can happen within the counties themselves.
County laws and state laws can be at variance. We were encouraged by our county to seek standards at the state level that could all be referred to. And if you look in the state laws, there's nothing that even defines a CLT. So our bigger goal is to have enabling legislation that declares and defines, whenever the issue arises, what a community land trust is for our legislators.
So, like with residential property, I think it's 15% now. I wonder if there's just so many ways that that could be addressed. I'll be really interested at some point to hear more about how you're addressing that, because we would love to be part of that conversation as well to help address that at the state level.
Good.
To say, okay, this is what needs to happen, this is how it should be happening, and to give maybe county appraisers a little more flexibility that they feel like they can go in then and address that at the local level.
Yeah, that's only one challenge.
Yeah.
But it is
What else?
another layer of public education. Public education of our supply side developer and real estate community is also very important. The beautiful part is they were already reaching out to us and saying, hey, we have a definition of workforce housing that's going to help you get through some stumbling blocks in your conversations about affordability. So we're finding that many CLTs will have, and this is very important, tripartite boards. Once you get to the point where you have gone beyond the test project to a real program here, the classic CLT, as they call it, has governance by a tripartite board that contains not only elected representatives living in the housing, but also resident neighbors who are not living in CLT land housing, and community leaders who, whether they're government officials or representatives of social service agencies or representatives of housing concerns, speak to the need for affordable housing. You want a tripartite board so that no one voice dominates over the others. Remember, it's not only for the benefit of those householders, it's for the benefit of the wider community.
So that's like a community housing development organizational board. I mean, that's what you just described. With CHODO is what we would call that. And so I understand completely why that is so important to be able to have that board so that, like you said, not one group is overriding the other and you have that third and a third. Our McPherson Housing Coalition board is a CHODO board. And that's how we do it. And the government officials, they would like to have more on our board. We're like, sorry, you can't take over this board. It has to be a third, and a third.
You've got the model already.
Yeah, it sounds very, very familiar to what we already have. Boy, this has been really, really interesting, Karolyn. Have you learned anything?
My head is swimming right now.
I know, me too. How do you ask questions?
There is so much that goes into this. So one of my questions had to do with the legal entity. Well, it sounds like that's kind of already in place. And I love the community discussions that are going on right now, that because of the housing study we had done, we already know what is needed in all of these communities. It's just a matter of getting the same vision and the same mission. And then how do you move that forward?
Oh, I have a question. Okay, that just brought, when you talk about the lending and all of that. So our Habitat for Humanity here, they are self-funded, so they hold the mortgage for their homes. And I don't know if that's typically how it's done or not. They hold the mortgage. So if somebody had quite a bit of money, could the nonprofit hold the mortgage, or is that never a part of how these are done? Do you know if that's possible?
It doesn't have to be a Habitat.
No, I know.
It doesn't have to be a group that will hold the mortgage.
I was just curious if that even happens.
What we found when we went to Lawrence was that they recommended we talk to credit unions. Credit unions have a very strong community basis, and they are very likely to say, oh, let's look at this model and find out how we can help. So getting the lending community involved when they realize that the history of CLTs shows a very low level of foreclosures, that this is a very good risk, they get interested in this as well.
Oh, wow.
Very interesting.
That is so good. We learn so much every time we have one of these podcasts, and we're just in awe of all the things that are out there to help with this affordable housing that we had no idea that any of this was. We heard about this before, but we really truly didn't understand what you were talking about. And now we're here being able to really dig down and be able to get the information that we need.
Another thing comes to mind. You mentioned public education. So we're always trying to educate the public about what's out there. Do you find now that it's established that you have to continue that public education? How much work goes into that in keeping people aware that this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it? Or does it just kind of take a life of its own and...
Oh, you can't let it take a life of its own because NIMBYism, not in my neighborhood, occurs in many forms with all kinds of housing.
Yeah.
We constantly are educating residents, neighborhoods, and boards in the essentials of what this shared equity model mean and how it works.
Okay.
It's too easy for people who have only partial information and don't know the model to start creating mythologies or asking questions about, do you mean you're going to? No, that isn't what we mean at all. But making analogies to well-understood models, such as a condominium, or the fact that in commercial ground leases, we all understand that is really, really important.
Yeah, you're going to lower my property value, Karolyn, if you try this.
Yeah, okay. Like that house sitting next to you that's getting run down that nobody's doing anything with isn't already lowering your property value.
So I have so these 12 steps that our listeners can't see them, but there's 12 steps here of how to do that. And I know you haven't had much of a chance to look at those. In my mind, I'm thinking, it would be helpful on our own website if maybe we had a link to some information. And I don't know if this is something or you would recommend we could put something on our website, because we try to do this in a way so it's not only just McPherson County, but maybe somebody listening in Europe. I don't know how Europe works, but we have people listening in other countries and across the country. If they saw this would be a good start for them, I think, of how to get this started. Of course, we would want to link also to that group that you were talking about earlier. I forget.
Grounded Solutions
Network. And give people the opportunity to go on the website and click on that link to say, hey, I wonder if this could work in my community.
You'll find from the Grounded Solutions Network site that there are illustrations of many paths to completing your first CLT project. But your checklist, I'll call it, your steps, your 12 steps are all essential. You don't have to worry too much about the sequencing of them, but building partnerships. I like to use this conversational model called study circles. That's what we spent a couple of years doing in Manhattan before we even said CLT is one of the solutions we need to pursue, and then learn more about it. So when people say study circles, well, how many of you guys have book clubs?
Oh, yeah.
Well, jump on that.
Yeah.
Or how many churches are there that in the past might have said, we're going to be glad to donate some volunteer time to something? We really rely on that curiosity and that interest and willingness to participate to drive these steps, but they're going to take different routes depending on the communities you have.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, and then trying to find that startup funding, because it sounds to me like you need at least one full-time staff who is completely dedicated to making this thing go. I mean, you can have an organization, and like McPherson Housing Coalition, we could potentially do this, but we would have to have a full-time person who was only dedicated to making sure that this thing got off the ground.
Yes, that goes for projects as well.
Yes, and so
PI, the principal investigator.
And that's the money we have. That's always the tricky part, is where do you find that startup funding to make this work? Because it's possible, but it's tricky.
Yeah. Yep. All it takes is time and money.
That's that's pretty much everything. Yeah, this is some really good stuff.
Well, and another one of the steps that it talks about on this list is creating the strategic plan. I know that was brought up in our meeting on Wednesday. We need a strategic plan for the county. How do you put these partnerships together so that everybody has a voice? What does that look like? So I think that, moving forward, as people hear more about CLTs, maybe this is something that, we have communities that say, hey, let's do this and let's do it scattered sites and improve our community. Because the one thing that came out in the study is every community has houses that need to be rehabbed. They're just sitting there for whatever reason, whether that means that the person has passed away and it's in the family and the kids don't live here, they don't want to deal with it. But those pieces of property need to be used in the community to help with the housing that's needed across the board. And then the other thing it says here, promote awareness and education. That requires a continued communication about what you're doing and why.
I think that's the hardest part.
That's the hardest part.
I think we go all over Facebook. We have our own podcasts. We're on every kind of social media you could ever imagine.
We've had in-person community meetings.
And people are like, oh, who's the McPherson Housing Coalition? Really?
Yeah.
We've been
what
here
do you do?
for 17 years, and they act like no one knows who we are. So that communication piece to me is the most difficult part of making sure you get the message out there and you get it out there correctly so that people are going to be able to buy into what you're doing. When we did the tiny homes, I don't know how many times people were unhappy with me mostly. And then as they saw what we were doing, they're like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that that's probably how this will go.
Yeah.
If we decide to pursue it at some time in the future when we get kind of done with some other stuff, is we will do it and then they'll be, this is awesome.
Mm-hmm. Demonstrate success.
That is how it
celebrate
works.
it.
That's how it
celebrate
works.
it with cultural events.
Yes, that's how it works. We have these great ideas and everybody's like, well, that sounds great. You do that. And then we do that, and then they're like, oh, well, this was cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, next time we'll allow you to participate.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, this is probably just the second of many conversations that would need to take place regarding community land trust and moving forward. But I appreciate so much, Donna. You came down here from Manhattan and drove down to meet with us in person. And I just want to thank you for your time.
You're quite welcome.
And your willingness to share the knowledge that you have.
And I want to make sure we give you the last word. So what else do you have to say?
What I have to say is that Kansas is ripe for this. Rural to urban, we know about properties that are basically dead capital. That we think could be home-owned by people that are looking for that solution.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. If you would be interested or you know someone who would be interested in being on Housing for Good, drop us a line, leave us a review. You can get a hold of us at housingforgood@mcphersonhc.org. Have a great day.